security, and hunger. And many people don't eat enough fruits and vegetables every day. The Better Living for Texans program is here to help you learn how to make healthy menu choices, save money at the grocery store, prepare quick and delicious meals, get more good nutrition in your day, and get more physical activity. Classes are fun, friendly, interactive, and free, and taught in English and Spanish. We are Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, helping Texans make their lives better.
Thank you for listening to Lone Star Community Radio. This program was broadcasted and recorded live from the LSCR studios in downtown Conroe, Texas. Lone Star Community Radio is supported by listeners like you. Donate and sponsor today. For more information on getting involved with Lone Star Community Radio, contact us at lscrstudios@gmail.com or visit us online at www.irlonestar.com.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to the Weekly Business Hour. I'm Rick Schisler. I'm your host. I'm a Silver Fox advisor as well as the founder of OneBestConsult.com. Well, right off the bat, I want to thank you for taking time to listen to our program today. I want to remind you that if you'd like to watch as well as listen, go to YouTube, find the Weekly Business Hour page, and you can click on there and you can watch as well as listen to today's program. I think we've got a wonderful program lined up for you. We are broadcasting from the main studios at Lone Star Community Radio. Lone Star is the community radio station for Montgomery County and the surrounding areas. I always have people ask me, well, what is that, community radio? It's where the community literally comes together, has an opportunity to communicate their various messages over the radio. We're live on FM radio, and we're also in podcast, videocast form. There's even an app that you can put on your phone if you want to listen while you're away from home or your office. So we're here to communicate, and today we're going to talk about business, primarily the smaller businesses, and I've got a great expert who's going to lead us through a phase of owning a business that I think a lot of people just don't pay much heed to, and they end up unhappy. I'll leave it at that. Before we move on, though, I want to give you my quick thought. We've started a little series about 3-4 weeks ago. We call it Washington Week, since so many exciting things are happening in Washington. At least that's what the press wants us to believe. And I try to find one that would directly, indirectly, ultimately impact our businesses, our small businesses. This week, I can't help it. It's entitled Keeping Secrets. All the news media last week, keeping secrets. It was a gotcha moment for the Trump administration, so the press thinks, and I guess the opposing party as well. But it did cause me to stop for a moment and say, okay, communication, think about that just for a second. I don't know that we spend any time, or at least very little time, thinking about our communications. We talk, we point, we send messages, email, text, and so on and so forth. But do we really think about, is that the best way to communicate? Are we able to deliver the message that we need to be communicated to the right audience, right? And what happened in Washington last week, again, was a little different, but the same idea. They had one person get the message that wasn't meant to get the message. So I encourage you, make sure you've got the correct channels for your communication, whether it be internally to employees or be out to your customers or potential customers. Make sure you get those messages delivered on time and available to those who would benefit from it. If you step back and think about it, I think you're going to find some areas that with just a little work, maybe a little investment, that you could tweak things, as they say, and have a much, much better communication system for your business. I want to remind you, too, that if you hear something on the show that you have a question about, you have a comment about how we do things, or you've just got a question about your very own business, drop me an email. It's real simple, Rick, R-I-C-K, at irlonestar.com. That's Rick at irlonestar.com. That comes here to the station, and I do respond to my emails. And for those who have listened to us before, we even bring some of those questions on the air in a mailbag segment from time to time. Well, now let's go to what we've all been waiting, or at least I've been waiting for, is to talk to a quote-unquote expert. to me, the foremost expert on exiting your business. It's kind of become called selling your business, whatever you get, giving the kids the keys to the front door, whatever you want to call it. But Mr. Rich Hall is here from the Rich Hall Group. He's been on the program before. He's a business advisor, an M&A advisor, and a certified exit planning advisor. He specializes in helping businesses build value-driven, sellable businesses that align with their personal, financial, and business goals. And I think that's important. Good morning, Rich.
Rick, thanks for having. Great to be back with your listeners. Let's get to it.
Well, let's do it, because that last sentence I mentioned about you of matching up with the personal goals of the seller, the business owner. I think that's one of the things that many times businesses get sold, or they try to sell them, right? And they really haven't thought through that part of the equation. In other words, what was the expression? What am I going to do when I grow up? Well, what are you going to do when it comes time to sell the business? You close the transaction. What are you going to do for a second act? And that means many things to many different people. But unfortunately, my experience is people don't really think it all the way out. And so 6 months, a year later, they're, why did I sell my business? What am I going to do? They're wondering. And that could apply to even employees who retire and haven't figured out what they really want to do, not just day one, but day 365 and so on and so forth. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the personal, financial, business goals. Why is it so important for people to think about life after the sale or transfer of the business?
It's funny. There's some stats out there that says 75% of business owners that sold their business regret doing so within the first year. And if you think about it, there's a lot of reasons why, if you don't plan, when you're running a business and you've been doing it for, say, 25, 30 years, and that's what that's what you've done all day, every day, even on the weekends, and then you'd start just running out of gas, and you say, this is it. Now's the time. I'm done. I want to sell it and ride off in the sunset. Well, when you've had that high energy of running a business, and then let's think about this too. If you're the owner of the business, then that business probably looks a lot like you, and it's got your identity in it. You come to work, and you're recognized as the boss, and you've got a place to go, and all of a sudden you wake up one day after the fact and say, all right, well, I've played golf, I've traveled, I've done everything that was on my list, and I'm only 6 months in. What now? And that's the thing that's very important to think about in advance, because the what now also goes back to, did you plan financially in advance to make sure that those goals or things that you want to do, you can also afford? So it's extremely important to sit down and spend time with your, looking in the mirror with your family, your spouse, and to really get a good handle on what that future looks like.
Well, it's interesting. After my father and my uncle sold the last piece of the family businesses, because there were several different businesses, but it was the original piece that my grandparents had started. One day I asked my dad, I said, after it had taken place and so on and so forth, I said, what do you miss the most? You know what he said? He says, I miss the paycheck. I said, well, Dad, your paycheck was nice, but it wasn't, I know firsthand it wasn't, grandiose and in this. He says, yeah, but a paycheck just validates you. You validate you're being productive and you're doing something or should be doing something. But in his case, he, my uncle, the family, they worked very hard in the business. So, but he missed the paycheck.
Yeah.
And I walked away. I have to tell myself for a brief second, I said, how can I put him on the payroll? Because I still had a business and we can send him a check, but it's the work and the check. It wasn't just getting a check. So those are the kind of regrets that I don't think people think about. And I think my father is an example. He hadn't thought about how important it was to him to be validated every other week and receive a check. Mm-hmm. So there's lots and lots of things to consider.
We actually, when we go in to work with business owners, our goal is to work for those owners thinking about some kind of a transition. And it doesn't mean that you have to sell the business outright. That's one. And you mentioned the word exit. I absolutely hate that word. It's become known in the industry, but most people think of exit as either sell or don't sell. There's a lot of other options to accomplish your goals. But when I go in and talk with a business owner, before we ever discuss the business itself, we're talking, all right, what are your personal goals? What does the future look like? How does that translate to your financial goals? Where's your estate at today? If you've identified your personal goals, you've got your financial goals, odds are pretty good, then you've got a number over what you're going to need post-working. And how does that compare? And is there an expectation that the business, when you sell it, is going to fulfill that gap, if there is one? And the third part that's equally as important is, what are your goals for the business itself? Is legacy important to you? Is what happens to the employees? Does this company have your personality, and therefore you'd like for it to continue as a pillar of the community type company? Or is that not important to you? And we cover all of that before we ever start talking about the business. Because once you find out and you get your business to a point where it may sell, then these goals are what become most important. It's not about the money. It's what these goals mean to you and your family.
Yeah, and I'm glad you added "and your family," because I think this is one of those very, very important times to talk it over with your family and explain, communicate, spouse particularly, what it looks like in your opinion going forward. What do you think it looks like? Because, they're along for the ride, whether they're active in the business or not. It's just important for spouses to communicate to the non-working or non-business involved spouse what's going on and where they're going. And I think people miss that. Mm-hmm. Personally, I like to talk about it with my spouse. One, she's sharp. She's got a little bit of a business background, lots of common sense, and she'll hit me. Now, her attention span to business questions maybe 3 or 4 minutes, so it can't be one of those prolonged discussions that I always enjoy with other business people. But no, I think it's very, very critical that people realize that. One observation I've made in my experience over the last 20-some years of working with businesses in all aspects is that something I learned at the Silver Foxes, in fact, from our good friend and one of the founders, Monty Pendleton, was the idea that you set your 3 basic goals at the beginning when you start your business. And about 2/3 of the way through my time as a business mentor and coach or whatever, I would not take a client on until we have answered at least those 3 basic questions. When, how much are you looking for, and to whom, meaning what type of buyer. But I was always amazed that there were small business owners, successful, 20 plus years, taking care of business, taking care of their families, meeting their personal goals, and they could not think and put on paper the answers to one or more of those questions.
Yeah.
And to me, doing that in the beginning prepares you to think about it as you go along, so that by the time I call you up and say, Rich, what do I need to do to prepare? What do I need? And start working with you to refine everything. I'm already there. I'm not at home plate. I'm around in first, maybe second, because I've thought through all this and I realize and recognize, hey, this is the rest of your life. And if you've planned properly, it should be a breeze.
Yeah, well, it's true, but sadly enough, most business owners don't think about, one, what that future does look like, other than, here's, my goal is to get to retirement, or my goal is to sell my business. I'm tired. I'm out of gas. My spouse is nudging me for when we're going to, move. And again, it can greatly dictate the success or lack thereof of when you sell your business. And that may not sound right at first, but what happens is when you start to prepare your business to be sold, you have to then start thinking of it in terms more of from the buyer's perspective. What is it they're buying? What are they trying to accomplish? Do they want to grow it significantly? Do they want to add it to their arsenal of other companies? And when that starts happening and you find out, let's say that you do start seeing the numbers that say, yes, okay, if I sell it, I won't have to worry about retirement, or it'll take care of my financial needs. Now these goals become extremely important, especially for things like your employees. We talk about legacy. I've got some clients that have said, Rich, I've run the company for 25 years. I've got employees that have been with me for 15 years. I want to make sure they're taken care of. Well, that can dictate the kind of buyer that comes in. If it's an institutional buyer or perhaps a private equity buyer, they may just look at your company to roll it up under theirs and grow it, and that may mean letting go of employees. Whereas others, I've had a client today that says, Rich, I've run it for all these years. I appreciate my employees, but guess what? Now is my time. I want max value for the company. I hope the employees are okay, but it's my time for the rest of my life. It's extremely important to understand this before you ever start the process.
My parallel to that is if you're an employee in a business and you get a new boss. I mean, they got that general similarity. A new boss want to do things, she want to do something differently, or, and the way their management style. At the very least, your employees with a new owner are going to face that typical. And I think that's one of the reasons as a seller of a business that I was okay thinking, hey, if they just brought a new boss in, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, somebody new is going to come in here, and some people may leave, some, be asked to leave, not just leave because they don't like it. So my control over the situation is not very high, and try to find a place for me as an owner that I feel comfortable.
Right.
Because you always, hopefully, have built a business, if you've been in business for 10 years or more, or even 5 years, you develop some employees that were the right fit, and they're key employees.
Yes.
And you care about them, and their families or their situations. So, and they'll bend over backwards to do anything to support you and your family. So it's a difficult question, but there are a lot of questions that need to be asked before you exit that business and wake up the next day and say, okay, and you can shout out, I'm free, or something like that. But what does that really mean? And meaningfully approaching that. One of the things that you mentioned before is, how do personal goals translate to financial goals? This is one of the obvious things that if they ask a question, it's going to be something like that. In other words, the money. Help me figure out the money and what's going to be available. But kind of talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, one thing is approximately 80% of a business owner's wealth is tied up in the business. Many business owners don't even take advantage of their company's retirement plan, as an example. Things they offer for their employees, they don't take advantage of themselves. And they say, hey, this is my company. If it needs blood, it's my blood. I'll do whatever I can for it to be successful. During the good times, I'll take money out of the company. During the bad times, maybe I don't take a paycheck. And that's not a sustainable way to plan for your future, because you're betting that when the company does end up selling, there'll be enough money there for your future, regardless of what that looks like. My recommendation is if you don't have, as a business owner, if you don't have a wealth advisor today, seek one out. There's different kinds that work with different asset levels, but they can really walk you through and help you understand better over what's important to you and what will make you happy. And therefore, where are you at today? How much money will it take? And keep in mind, when you sell your business, there's significant tax implications. And there's ways that you can structure the sale that can help reduce or minimize the taxes. So there's a much bigger play here that if you do the planning in advance, you can save yourself an enormous amount of money. And then having this, depending on, for example, how old you are, do you still have gas left in the tank that you may want to do something else? Are you interested in buying another company, perhaps? You and I both, Rick, are part of Silver Fox Advisors, and I can't tell you the number of members that join, and when you pull them off to the side and grab a cup of coffee, they say, yeah, Rich, we were highly successful in our business. We sold it. We did very well. But I want to spend time with other people and other business owners, and I want to give back, and I want to run the CEO roundtables like we do, because they've still got gas in the tank and they still want to contribute. And that's really important to walk through so that you understand when that time comes and you sell your business, is it going to generate enough for you, minus fees and taxes, but also give you the kind of lifestyle that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, and that's really important. And I 100% agree with you. Having someone, wealth management, who has experience, understands that, not just the guy that's got the best stock tip, but somebody that can put that part of the plan together for you. Because it's kind of like buying an annuity. The interest and the recommendation for annuities kind of go up and down. Well, they're a source of regular income until they're not. But so there's risk. There's risk in anything. And that was something my father, when he got all this money, so to speak, and didn't have a place to go to work, he was kind of dumbfounded. And he was a sharp guy, financial accounting, but he wasn't comfortable handing his money off. And then we devised a plan about how to do that, driven mainly by him comfortable. So he never chased the best return. It was security, so to speak.
Sure.
In his case, muni bonds, so that was so that's something that people need help. They need to figure that out, where they want to go. And I understood that. He had never, he'd owned stock in banks, but all local, but he'd never really dealt with on a regular basis that whole investment idea. Okay, you got a handful of money. What do you do with it? What do you invest in?
Yeah.
And he didn't want to be too active in a business after that, even though he did a lot of volunteer. But I don't think that's uncommon. People sell their business if they've really done that for 20, 30 years. And it could have been multiple businesses, like I did. I went from one to another and sold them and so on and so forth. And I enjoyed that for 20 years. And then I was tired.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Well, Rich, we need to take a short break now. We've been on the air quite a while now. I appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue this discussion about what happens after the sale. And when you sell the business, are you really, really ready to do it? So please stay with us. We'll be right back with you.
A Lone Star Community Radio is looking for those who are interested in hosting their own talk show, with monthly and weekly slots available on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, and on irlonestar.com. Start your own podcast, create your first YouTube channel, and be on TV. Contact Lone Star Community Radio online at irlonestar.com or call the station message line at 936-647-3776 to take your first step into the radio world.
Have a legal question? Are you a resident of Montgomery County? Call 281-645-6344 to talk to a volunteer attorney from the Woodlands Bar Association. We answer the phones on the first Monday of every month at 281-645-6344 from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. to provide general legal information and information about legal resources to Montgomery County residents.
Lone Star Boxer Rescue is a nonprofit organization serving Montgomery County and surrounding areas, dedicated to the health and well-being of the boxer breed. Lone Star Boxer Rescue is run and managed 100% by volunteers since 1999. Our main objective is to rescue, rehabilitate, and rehome boxers that come to us from many sources, including local animal shelters, owner surrenders, and strays. For more information about Lone Star Boxer Rescue, visit our website at lsbr.org.
Our talk shows and music shows are looking for sponsors. Want to expand your brand awareness? Reach the hyper-local audience in Montgomery County? Lone Star Community Radio sponsorships accomplish this. Want to see our stats and rates? Check out irlonestar.com/sponsor for more information. Or call in and leave us a message at 936-647-3776 with your question. Get seen on TV or YouTube and heard on our podcast, FM, and internet radio. Sponsor your local radio station with Lone Star Community Radio.
Lone Star Community Radio is ready for the summer. If you or anyone you know is looking for a summer internship, Lone Star Community Radio is a great place to learn the radio and TV business. Contact the station at info@irlonestar.com or call the station's message line at 936-647-3776. Lone Star Community Radio offers a great opportunity to those interested in learning about the radio world.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Weekly Business Hour, and we have the good fortune to have a conversation today going with friend of the station, friend of the Weekly Business Hour, and absolutely an expert on the selling and transferring of your business, Mr. Rich Hall. Well, Rich, what else is it that I need to consider when I reach that point? I sell the business, I'm turning the page, new chapter. Let's talk further about that.
So, great question. When you're looking to sell the business, again, we go back to our goals initially. But when you start the negotiation process of selling the business, it can take a lot of different twists and turns. And you want to stay true to your goals, but there's ways that the deal can be structured. Number one, that can save you considerable. We talked about that earlier on taxes. But there's other ways that the buyer may request for you to stick around for a while, and the buyer's bank may request you to stick around for a while to ensure that during the transition, the business continues to run properly. And there's a couple of approaches, they call it. One is what's called an earn-out period, which says a percent of what you're going to get paid for the company is based upon the performance of some kind, that's negotiated, performance of the company over time. Therefore, if the company performs the way we've always said it would be, then you get whatever that amount is. A lot of times it may be 10%, maybe 20%. But here's the thing. You can't just go to the closing when you're saying, I'm selling the business, and then I'm done. Because you've got a lot of money at stake, and the legacy of that business and the employees are depending upon you to show up and to do a transition period. And we can talk a lot about the earnouts. There's a lot of really important information you'd want to learn. Others may ask for what's called a seller's note for you to help finance part of the sale of the company. You obviously, if you're still getting paid over that percent amount over time, you still want to make sure that as you do your handover and your transition, you're setting the new buyer up for success as absolutely much as possible. And then we all have the hope and goal that we can minimize that time frame so that the new owner can take off and do how they want to run the business, and you've received all your proceeds. But I just say that to prepare people that are thinking about selling, is that quite often there is a time frame afterward that you still need to be engaged and make sure that you're helping the company be as successful and the new buyer as successful as possible.
Yeah, I think that's an important idea there, or point, an issue, is recognizing that it serves you better, if done right, to be around, be available, even though it might not be contractually. But make sure that the new ownership realizes or understands they can reach out to you. Now, it may turn into a situation where you're getting calls and contacts all day long and stuff, and you got to be able to rein that in. But I think the success of the buyer is important for a lot of reasons. Even if you don't have an earnout or any stake in a seller's note or anything like that, it's important, in my opinion, to make sure that they're successful. I know when we sold the last part of our family business, it was bought by an investment group, and within a few years, they busted it. And then it reformed, and they busted it again. So within 5 years, it was twice, and then they finally just sold off the pieces. And for all practical purposes, the business itself just disappeared. Yet it had been part of the Houston landscape for 50, 75 years, and other cities as well. So it's kind of interesting. I never did ask my dad if that bothered him or not, but I think he just wanted the plan to work, which was his nature, and the plan was to sell the business.
Yeah.
So sell it, and hopefully it's done. And he gave me one marching order, and I think people think this, they don't often say it though, is he says, I only want one thing out of this transaction, because it wasn't economic for him and my mom at that point in their life, because they'd had other business and interest and stuff that had done very well for them. It was, I don't want anybody to knock on my door. And I looked at him, I'll never forget. I said, what? He says, I don't want anybody to sue me. I want everything done right, all above board. And I'm even willing to give up money just to make sure that whoever buys it or whatever, is happy, is successful. And because I just don't want, that's the number one thing that your mother and I don't want, to be disturbed. And I thought that was kind of classic.
Yeah.
And that's the way that was his definite feeling. I think a lot of sellers think that, but they don't really think it through, if that makes sense. That is an important element to everybody, really, to some degree.
It is. And like we were talking about, when you think about your business goals, that also dictates the type of buyer that may come in. And the type of buyer is going to also dictate quite often how much money you get for the company, and what the terms are. We call things the strategic buyer. They usually pay the most for it, because it's very important to them to have your company in addition to its financial performance. But then there's other forms, and you may say, well, listen, I'm going to make enough money as it is. I don't want former employees calling me at midnight saying, why did I lose my job? I trusted you. And I've actually seen that before, where someone got the top dollar from a strategic buyer and regretted it within a month, because most of the employees were let go. And they were personal friends. They had worked together for 15, 20 years, and it was a very difficult time. That's why these type of very emotional things can occur when selling a business, and we talk about them way far in advance. So the owner knows what to expect, what's coming, and if it gets to a point where maybe we're crossing into a different area, we'll remind them, have your goals changed? If so, that's fine. Make the decision going in, but knowing here's what to expect. And most time, business owners will stay true to their goals, as long as they know in advance what to expect.
I was sitting here thinking about the employee thing, or other situations, people, entities, things that could disturb you, so to speak. if that's what, is important to you. I think it's important to everybody to some degree. But you have two choices popped in my head. One is change your phone number when you sell the business, and there may be other reasons to do that. And the second thing is you just moved to Florida, right? Which I've seen buyers, particularly friends in the North, Michigan, up in New York, and they sell their businesses, and I mean, they can't pack the car up fast enough.
Yeah.
They're gone to Florida, if you will, or other points with different weather and different opportunities to enjoy life. So they become unreachable since they're on the golf course or
Sure.
out in the bay fishing or whatever it might be. Let me ask you one thing. I want to back up just for a second. Is you mentioned talked about the importance of having a wealth manager to help you decide where you need to put this money that you're receiving on the sale of the business. The other person that I think is very important is the estate lawyer, the lawyer that does wills and estates. And the reason being is, one is the statistics are just overwhelming how many people die without a will to begin with.
Right.
Now, you're going to assume somebody who ran a successful business is going to have a will. Well, maybe, but maybe not. But get past that. So they have it, but they haven't looked at it or updated it in 20, 30 years. And a good time to do that as you move into this phase of your life, because all of a sudden you've gone from, say, illiquid assets being a business to liquid assets being money. And that can change how things need to be structured in your will. And you mentioned that as far as trust, and the most important thing is charities, things what I'm going to do to help people with a certain portion of that money. And but I think that's a really important little checklist item.
Actually, Rick, I'm glad you brought it up. I highly recommend, if there's business owners listening today and you've not updated your estate plan, feel free to reach out to the radio show, reach out to me. I've got recommendations. But here's the thing. Here's some sobering stats for you. 50% of business owners exit their business involuntarily. All right, things like death, that's one that's obvious, divorce, perhaps a disagreement with a partner, financial distress or maybe emotional distress, a lot of different reasons. And if you don't have the paperwork and the things, and in this case, because it may not be death, there's tools you can put in place that says, if something does happen to me, how does a company continue? Who makes decisions? And how are they made? This concept called either an operating agreement, depending on the type of entity you have. It may be an update to your bylaws. But you want to have those scenarios covered. In the event that something does happen, then you know how the business will continue to run. Otherwise, if you do pass away, your will takes over. And if that happens, imagine that perhaps say you married again and it was your kids that were in the will and you hadn't updated the will. How are your kids going to run the business when your spouse is there with nothing? So it's extremely important. There's also tax strategies that can be done before you sell your business to greatly reduce the amount. There's also, if you remember, there was estate tax exemptions are right at $14 million, 13.9 through the end of this year. Unless that gets extended, it's set to repeal at the end of this year and drop all the way down to $5 million, which means, that's a very large amount that will become taxable starting in 2026. I was working with a business owner, did not want anything to do with a wealth advisor. He was comfortable managing his own money. He felt that most people were, all they're going to do is charge me a lot to do the same that I would end up doing, until we started modeling what the deal was going to look like. And when he saw his tax bill was well into the millions, he's like, Rich, what do I do? I said, now you ready to listen? Let's get somebody in here, both a wealth advisor, let's get an estate planning attorney or tax attorney, and let's structure this out and plan on it accordingly. And I've seen many millions of dollars saved just by doing this in advance of a sale.
Yeah, it's like anything. It's part of the preparation.
Yes.
Or as I call them, the checklist that we need to go through in any kind of transaction or change. And this is a big one, big
Yes,
transaction.
very.
No doubt about it. Second only to buying your home. I used to say that buying the home was the biggest investment we ever made. Well, if you own a successful business, I will argue that that's the biggest asset that you own. And I think that's wonderful. We've got a minute or two left, Rich, and there's a question out there is when the deal is structured, and there's several different ways that I can think of, where the owner sticks around. I've seen it for 2 years, a year, under contract. They have a contract. And I personally did that once when I bought a business, and it didn't really work out. But that had to do with, let's just say, a bad attitude of the guy that sold the business. He didn't have the right attitude, maybe is a better. Anyway, the points to consider if your business is being sold, do you want to be tied to that business? In other words, continuing to show up in what role or whatever, and whether it has to do with, just an earn-out maybe attached, all the different variations. But the point I'm trying to get at is what should you consider if, for a variety of reasons and a variety of ways, they may put you on a consulting basis. See, there's all kinds of ways. Should you stick around, and if you do, what do you need to be careful about?
Great question. First, I always advise clients, prepare well enough in advance before you sell your business so that the business is easily transferable over to a new buyer, therefore reducing the risk of there being problems with the business after the buyer takes over. The reason being is earn-out periods, seller notes are all designed to have the seller have skin in the game so that they will ensure that the company continues to run well and they just don't run off in the sunset. Now, here's a key thing. Earn-out periods and earn-outs have had a bad rep. And one thing to know real quick is that it may be tied to company performance, revenue, profitability. Be careful of that one. I've heard people say gross profit, not net. Because here's why. Let's say that you had a 20% of the purchase price in an earn-out over, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And I've seen it as far as 6 years, if you can imagine. And you look at it and you say, this is a good company, this is great. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that's an aggressive target we've got to hit, but we can do it. Here's the thing. You're no longer the boss. You don't dictate the direction and the decision-making of the company, even though you've got your 20% or 10%, whatever the amount is, tied up into it. So if the new owner decides to go down a different path or they're not successful, you may have agreed to something that you have no control over. In a lot of cases, banks, advisors will require seller notes or earn-out periods because of the risk factor in the company. The best way to minimize that is to prepare far enough in advance and to get your company in a great shape so when it transfers over to the new buyer, it's highly successful for both parties.
It's funny, and a real final point, and kind of wind things down. The word earn-out to me is a positive word, only because I was basically brought up in the real estate business. And when you sell income-producing properties, whole different ballgame. It's a business, but it's totally different. That earn-outs are not uncommon, or at least when I was involved some years ago, that was part of the typical transaction that you would tack an earn-out. Not all the time, but that was a way encourage you to, because typically we would hold on to management for a period of time because we had a separate management entity. But anyway, earnouts were the gravy. So, but I can see the point on selling your business, and you make an excellent overall perspective, in my opinion, is when you sell your business, even if you stay involved to some degree in some capacity, you have given over control to someone else. And brother, you need to look in the mirror and say, it's done. Even though you may, and that leads to potentially at the very least frustration, whatnot, but you will lose control.
Very hard. It's very hard to hand over, but you're right. You are no longer in control. And if you have a significant amount of your personal wealth tied up into it, that could be at risk. So it's always best, like we said, prepare far enough in advance so that you've got a strong enough company. So when you are negotiating for the sale of your business, you can negotiate to minimize earnout periods, transition things, seller's notes, and et cetera.
Yeah, it's different, folks. And when you've sold a business, as I have several times, it's different. And that's why, whether it's a legal matter or an accounting matter, you need an expert. You need someone like Rich, who's done this over and over. You know, many of I assume your clients have never sold a business, may never sell another one. It's a one-off. And that alone would make me want to seek somebody out like yourself for advice, because like you say, you save taxes, but there are a lot of other things you can sell. Yeah. Well, we're getting the high sign, so that means it's time to wrap it up. Mr. Rich Hall, I deeply appreciate you again coming in and talking about a subject that in my opinion, just doesn't get talked about enough, and that's the day after and where I'm going to go for the second act, so to speak. If folks want to reach out to you directly, what's the best way for them to contact you?
I would say hit the website, richhallgroup.com. A lot of information out there. The contact information is there as well, and I'm happy to respond to any and all messages and contacts.
Okay, folks, you've got contact information. I definitely would use it. Please put a note on your calendar for, again, next Monday, 11 a.m. We'll be back here with a new guest and a new topic to talk about. Again, don't forget to send me an email if you've got something you want us to hash out, or at the very least, I will respond to your concern or question about your business. The video podcast of today's program will be published in the next day or so. Just look for the Weekly Business Hour page, Facebook, YouTube, even here at the studio, irlonestar.com. You can go to that page and click on the shows. Morning, click on the Weekly Business Hour, and there's a copy there as well. And as I try to always tell people, whether I'm in conversation directly with them or on this show, until next week, stay engaged and always keep your focus on what counts in your business. Thanks.